And a pleasant good evening to you and yours, and welcome to the Brevard Sports Network and Mouthin Off Sports Talk. I'm Alan Slaughter-Zinski, and tonight, as always, the show is brought to you by Archaic Design. We want to thank Russ and his great staff at Archaic Design for the best in you name it when it comes to your house and redesigning your house. Archaic Design, 321-956-2066. Go online at archaicdesign.com and book an appointment. I can tell you right now, it'll be well worth your time. They've got everything from I was literally down there taking pictures a couple of weeks ago and I was taking pictures of everything from kitchen knobs that go on cabinets to the most big, beautiful bathtubs that you can imagine. They have got it all at Archaic Design. All right, we got a lot to discuss. And believe it or not, a lot of local sports to discuss too, even though nothing is going on. I hope you like the new setup here. We kind of compacted things a little bit, breaking out the mini helmets. So excited about that. We're not done yet because we got a whole other side that we're going to be restoring. But as always, here on Sunday nights, joining me, my partner in crime for Mouthin Off Sports Talk, my good buddy, my good friend, Mr. Anthony Nachreiner. Nach, how are you, man?
I'm good, Alan. We're getting closer to college football. We're getting closer to the NFL. Like I was telling my girlfriend this earlier today, I'm kind of having, not quite, I don't want to say seasonal depression, but I'm ready for football to be here because I can't wait for another couple of weeks.
Have the dog days of summer sunk in on you yet?
I think they are because, I mean, don't get me wrong. The Brewers did sweep the Reds. I didn't think that was going to happen today.
Playing good.
They were playing pretty well. But at the same time, I'm just ready for college football. I'm ready for high school football. I'm ready for the NFL. I mean, I was jacked this week because I know you got the nice little helmet right there.
What'd you think of the creamsicle release?
I loved it. The video, too. I mean, the machine was in there. Mike Allstott as a bouncer. I love what Derek Brooks brought to the table. I think they picked the 4 best bucks to go along with it. The only guy I might have thrown in there was Tristan Wirfs.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, I loved their release. I love the way it looked. I mean, I'll be honest. I really wish there was a Leroy's in Tampa. I'd definitely visit that club.
When I bought these helmets, I originally bought them. I thought, there were 2 things I liked about having, you can't buy a throwback Jags helmet. I mean, you can, right? But
I was about to say, that's got to be really hard to come by.
Yeah, it's just same as the Ravens one, right? But when I bought them, I thought, I love that buck, okay?
Bucko Bruce, yeah.
Yeah, and I love the fighting dolphin, that old fighting dolphin. I love that thing.
I'm telling you right now, the Buccaneers realize this. I don't know why the Dolphins haven't. If the Dolphins would go back to that look or the look that they had from the 80s and the 70s, they go back to that look, I think they start winning more football games. Because as soon as Tampa went back to the red and pewter and got away from those digital clock numbers, we started winning again.
What's the first thing? Who's the first player you think of when you see that throwback creamsicle? I know you're a little younger than I am, but
I was gonna say I think the highlights say Leroy Selman, so I think Selman, but I also think of Allstott, Lynch, Sapp, Brooks, because all those guys wore it. Mm-hmm. Allstott probably would be second.
For me, it's Doug Williams. It's nobody else but
yes.
Doug Williams.
Yeah, Doug.
Listen, huge Doug Williams fan I was back in 1979, watching him take the Buccaneers to the NFC Championship game against the Rams at the time. And I even felt like as a 10-year-old kid at the time that had the Bucs beaten the Rams, I felt like they would have had an opportunity. I thought they would have given the Steelers a better matchup in the Super Bowl. But it didn't happen, and Steelers went on to win their 4th. But Doug Williams, I thought, loved his Tampa Bay. And, of course, he would go on to get his Super Bowl, having the greatest quarter in the history of the Super Bowl until Tom Brady did so against the Falcons in the comeback. But Doug Williams, certainly a stellar football career.
The only thing is that if Hugh Culverhouse wasn't so cheap and such a schemer.
He is a cheap bastard.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you right now. Listen, that's the reason why the Bucs have one of the worst winning percentages in all sports. It's not just the NFL. Culverhouse was cheap. I mean, and you think back to, like I said, I know his son tried to debate or try to dissuade from what Bo Jackson said or what happened when Bo Jackson was being linked to the Bucs when they had the number 1 overall pick at that time. But I absolutely believe that Hugh Culverhouse did exactly what Bo Jackson accused of, because he's just that much of a schemer. And had he not been the owner, or I don't know if he would have, if he had not sold to the Glazers, I don't know what would have happened to Tampa. They might have moved from that point, gone someplace else, and that would have been really sad. But
no, you're
either way,
absolutely
Doug
you're right.
should have been a Buck. And if if Hugh Culverhouse would have paid him, I don't think the 80s would have been so miserable for Bucs fans.
I want to give a shout out when we get to the local sports. I just didn't want to forget. I was looking at who won the soccer game.
Brevard SC 3-1.
Brevard SC, the USSL team, wins 3-1. Do they get to play again at home?
We don't know yet.
All right, well, we'll find out. If they are, I'm sure we'll be broadcasting it for you. The other thing we got going on is a bunch of interviews. We still have a couple that you haven't seen yet. You haven't seen Shane Staples. You haven't seen James Hines. They were both in studio. Tomorrow night, we're going to run part 1 of an interview I did last summer that's certainly worth rerunning again, and that's with Chuck Goldfarb. Part 1 tomorrow night. Part 2 will be on Tuesday night. Tomorrow night, we get up through Chuck's Merritt Island days, and then in part 2, we take it over from when he went to Cocoa. So you don't want to miss that. I promise you, Chuck, an iconic, legendary Hall of Fame coach and administrator here in Brevard County. And coming in studio this week tomorrow, we've got 3 interviews scheduled tomorrow. We've got Chris Holyfield coming in. We've got the 2 Jakes coming in this week, Weatherspoon and Richardson from Melbourne Baseball. We've got the Trouts coming in tomorrow, Gunner and Marcus Trout, the kickers for Holy Trinity and Cocoa. We've got some of the Cocoa Tigers receiving corps coming in on Tuesday night. It's that time, folks. The coaches shows, again, start, and we'll release the lineup and the location tomorrow on Brevard Sports Network. Speaking of coaches, speaking of hiring Nach, I got a phone call early this morning from one Brian Helton, and Coach Helton informed me that the newest football coach at Satellite High School is a very familiar face to Brevard County residents. Brevard native Tony Piccolo returns to Space Coast. He's named the associate head football coach for the Scorps. This is a terrific hire, Nach.
I was about to say, I remember Tony Piccolo from my early days and when he was at Cocoa Beach and what he was able to do. He had a really talented team. I believe it was in 2012. Had a great quarterback.
8-3.
Yeah, the quarterback's name escapes me at the moment. But, yeah, no, there was some success. And so I think a really great get for the Scorpions and Coach Brian Helton to have Tony Piccolo on staff. And it'll be really interesting. I'll tell you what, the Scorpions, I was looking at their schedule. It's a tough one, but, man, they look like they're going to be a fun team this year and should be in the mix.
And the even better news is one of us each and every week will have the absolute pleasure to talk to Piccolo and Helton, as they are one of the 4 teams we are contracted with this year to broadcast all of their football games. So we're very excited about that. And congratulations to Coach Piccolo. I first met Coach Piccolo back in 2016 when he was with John Wilkinson on that Cocoa Tigers team when he came back from college. He was actually out in North Dakota coaching. Coach Piccolo was at the Powerhouse. I got the name right here, knocking, because I know you're going to want to know, because I know you know those. Valley City State in North Dakota, one of the most successful NAIA programs, JUCO football programs in the country. Yeah.
Yep. Nope.
So
very familiar.
He came back in 2016 and went to work with John Wilkinson, and of course was part of that state championship team. Got the itch to be the head coach someplace. East River opened up, a fairly new school, in 2009. Coach Piccolo has not only been the winningest head football coach at one high school, but he's done it at 2, because he is that winningest head football coach at East River. And, of course, they had a great season a couple of years ago in which they won 9 games, and they won their first and only district championship. Of course, last year, tragedy, absolute tragedy, struck East River when their quarterback was tragically killed. He was helping out somebody on the roadside. It happened after a football game on a Friday night, and that entire community was devastated. They still are devastated. And so our thoughts and prayers remain. But I know that that had a tremendous, and still has a tremendous impact on Coach Piccolo. So a great hire there. Just some quick tidbits on local sports that I don't want to miss. Just got a text from head coach Sarah Wayne of the Vieira Hawks volleyball team. How good are they going to be this year? Well, they're on a mission. They went 14-0, and they were team camp champions at the University of Tampa this weekend. So great job by Sarah Wayne. And we're going to be putting a post up here in the next couple of days on Brevard Sports Network that honors the 12U team for Countdown Volleyball, as they were junior AAU national champs this year. So be on the lookout for that as well. But other local sports news this week, Nach, I didn't see any Little League teams win a state championship. We sent several, and I'm not sure that any did. So I know Caleb will keep us up to date if he comes across any of that. But the draft, the Major League Baseball draft was this week, Nach.
Yeah.
And we had a couple of guys go in this draft, former Brevard County young men that were drafted. And I tell you what, I couldn't, Andrew Walters, the outstanding closer from the University of Miami and former Bayside pitcher, was selected in this draft. I believe, God, it eludes me who picked him. Cleveland, the Cleveland Guardians picked him in the draft. But Walters, a hard-throwing, right-handed, closer. I believe Andrew Walters, who throws a great mid-90s fastball, has a really good opportunity to pitch in the major leagues this year. He did he played at Eastern Florida State as well. So congratulations to Walters. And as you see him on the screen there, he just throws straight smoke. His ball rises and moves in the zone. Also, I want to make sure I get it right and congratulate former Titusville Terrier standout Jason Woodward, who was selected by the Milwaukee Brewers in the 4th round of the MLB draft. He was pick 119. And Jason and his brother Jackson, both with great careers at Titusville. Florida Gulf Coast. He breaks a 4-year streak, of Florida Gulf Coast players not being drafted. But he goes to the Milwaukee Brewers. I believe he was going to be a junior, and I also believe that he'll spend a little time in the minor leagues before he hits the majors. Of course, a lot of attention, and rightfully so, was always centered around his brother Jackson, who at a very young age, in his early 20s, is not a one-time but a 2-time cancer survivor.
Wow.
Jackson with an incredible story. Michael Parsons of Eastern Florida State did a great interview with him. You can Google that. But so we do have a couple of Brevard County guys that go. Now, I also want to discuss the 2 that didn't go that we previewed. The first I want to talk about is Alex Sosa. Now, Alex was, I want to tell the story properly here. Alex, a Major League Baseball team reached out early in the Major League Draft. And when I say early, Nach, I mean, and we talked about this last week. So when I say early, I mean 2nd round. Okay? Early.
That's pretty
Not
good.
high,
That's still pretty
mid
good.
to low. Okay? Reached out and made an offer in the 7-figure range. Now, I spoke to Mr. Pete Sosa, Alex's father, not spoke to, but messaged back and forth with Pete Sosa the day before the MLB draft. I sent my thoughts and prayers and good lucks. And, Pete told me that they had given their number, and they did. And if that number was met, then they would gladly go play Major League Baseball. But if the number wasn't met, that Alex would happily go back to NC State. Now, I think Alex was presented with the toughest of toughest decisions because that offer does come. It is in the low 7 figures. And for those of you that don't know, that's $1.1, $1.2 million range. I won't say, I did some digging. I won't say the team that offered it, but I will tell you that there was no hesitation. I mean, thought about it briefly, and then he was back in Raleigh working out with his team the next day. A lot of people have, praised this decision, which I do. I think, you want to talk about a guy that's betting on himself, that's Alex Sosa. And if anybody has a right to bet on himself, it's Alex Sosa. With the way first of all, he's a late bloomer. Alex Sosa is a freshman. You wouldn't even recognize him. Pete sent me a picture of him and Adley Rutschman when Alex was he was 5'5" and soaking wet. He probably couldn't stand sideways in the shower or he'd fall through the drain. Okay? But man, did he just blossom into this Major League Baseball prospect. And, I was talking to Brett Black, who went to NC State and said he absolutely loved it there. And Brett Black praised his decision as well. Brett, of course, played professional baseball. And it's just tough to turn that kind of money down because now he's not draft eligible for 3 years.
Right.
Knock on wood. I don't see, Alex is going to knock it out of the park. In fact, all of the Wolfpack magazines have Alex as the projected. He's not going to catch this year. I mean, he may catch Sunday games sometimes. But he's projected as the starting designated hitter up at NC State, which is huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge. What would you have done? What would you advise your son to do in this situation?
That's really, really tough because, like I said, you can go with the money, but eventually money runs out. So for me, I think is that I think Alex made the right decision. I think if they had the number, that was what the number they wanted, and it wasn't met, absolutely go back. At least that makes that decision easier because everybody thinks about, you go back to the movie Moneyball and kind of talks about Billy Bean's journey and what he did. So I think the fact is that I think it's a big gamble by Alex to go back to NC State because anything can happen. It's college baseball. You got 3 years. Who knows? He might find himself so good he might be going to LSU in 3 years or 2 or 3 years just because we see how the transfer portal works right now. But at the same time, I think this is a great move by him. I think this is a great gamble because at the same time, you could look at that number and go, okay, man, that's a really nice number. But then by the time he finishes his time at NC State, all of a sudden we're talking about a first-round pick and we're talking about somebody maybe in the top 10 that's being looked at automatically once they're drafted to an organization. They're a prospect already in the top 30 of that organization.
Alex has got a great personality. He can push that NIL envelope at NC State, make some money there.
True.
So that changes the ball game a whole lot as well. And, I absolutely love the decision that Alex made to go to NC State. I thought it showed a lot of cojones, man.
Oh, it does.
I mean, a lot of cojones. And
but
I can honestly say I know I would not have made that decision as an 18-year-old kid.
Just, again, I don't know what the Sosa family, I don't know them. You know them better than I
Yeah.
do. But I think at the same time, too, if I'm a touted prospect or touted college recruit, thinking about that NIL money, and obviously football's raking it in, but college baseball's got some places now.
Yeah.
If you got a really good baseball program, and especially in the Carolinas, how much they love baseball,
Yeah.
and how fanatical they are, I'm telling you what, there's going to be some money thrown at him for NIL.
Yeah,
That may offset that low number that he got, and so it's just like, okay, well, this still works for him, which is the best of both worlds. He still gets to play college baseball.
Gets the education.
Gets the education, which is important, because, again, you can fall back on that degree. One of the biggest things is not even so much the piece of paper they hand you. It's
Right.
literally the alumni base within that school that's probably worth more than the piece of paper. But the alumni base, if you were a graduate of NC State, I think that plays a key factor. But the best of both worlds, you play college baseball, you work on your craft, and you could probably still make some decent money.
Yeah, no doubt. Great points by the man, Anthony Nachreiner there. I was a little upset at the fact that nobody took a shot on Riley Jackson from O'Galley. Look, Riley had a hell of an MLB combine for a high school catcher. I don't know why. I did some poking around. I didn't really get any answers. But Riley will get his time. I knowing Riley the way I know Riley Jackson, I believe this will motivate Riley to want to tear the. Riley is the kind of player who puts his heart and soul. When he's throwing the ball, back to the pitcher. It's like he's throwing every play, man, with the same. I mean, that's Riley Jackson. I've never seen a kid work as hard as Riley did every day. And his dad, Bobby Jackson. You know, I was watching the Home Run Derby the other night, and as I was watching, like, Adley Rutschman's father throw batting practice to him, I could easily envision Bobby Jackson throwing to Riley Jackson. That's the relationship they have, you know, and how hard they work. So my heart broke that he didn't, because I know that Riley really wanted to lean more towards playing professional baseball. Riley wanted to work his way through the system. Don't get me wrong, he's always wanted to be at Florida State. He's, you know, the kid committed in October of his freshman year, okay, to becoming a Knoll. But I think as it progressed and he got to play in these major league parks and these showcase tournaments and things of that nature, I think it tugged on his heartstrings a little bit and made him to say to himself, if I get that draft pick, I'm going to go, and that's where I'm going to build my career. So my heart just breaks for Riley.
Well, I think if nothing else, I mean, if you're talking about a kid like that, can you imagine the chip that puts on his shoulder to just make him work that much harder, which probably gives him even more advantage over some of these other guys. So I think that as much as it does suck, I think this absolutely gives that kid just a huge chip on the shoulder to motivate him even more. And, man, sometimes, I mean, we've seen how that kind of motivation really can turn players and move them forward.
Yep, no, absolutely. And proud of all of them. But, you know, all of the, you know, we always are, of all of the Brevard County young men and women that go on beyond college to do some things, and so good for them. Want to toot our own horn a little bit here for a second. Earlier this week, I had Dr. Andrew Ramjet on from the Florida Coaches Coalition, and want to thank everyone. Jackson, you want to thank Caleb, Donnie Reber, Billy, everybody that's ever put a headset on for Brevard Sports Network, as we were named the 2022-2023 Florida Coaches Coalition Media Outlet Platform of the Year. Awesome. It's our first ever award that we've won. And I can tell you right now, it's sunk in. And I just couldn't be more proud of everyone here at Brevard Sports Network. And I want to thank Andrew Ramjet for that honor because, you know, there are a lot of people out there that do what we do in terms of, but I don't think there's a lot that put the blood, sweat, and the tears into it like our staff does here. And, Nach, of course, you being a part of this now even makes it tenfold. So I want to congratulate all of the guys here at Brevard Sports Network. So thank you for all of your hard work, because that award means a hell of a lot to me. We're not done with local sports, because high school football, Nach, is right around the corner. And tonight we're going to talk about the Cocoa Tigers and the Heritage Panthers a little bit. Let's start with the reigning 2S state champion, because you always start with the state champ. Hell of a year last year. We did a preview on them the other day, and I want to thank Caleb for helping me a lot with that preview. And Nach, as you come back into high school football, you saw a lot of those great Cocoa Tigers teams play.
Oh, yeah.
Talk a little bit about what it is. You know, I moved to Brevard County in 2008. So talk a little bit about what it is to know what that Cocoa Tiger legacy is as an outsider, because you went to Melbourne.
I went to Melbourne, and we played, you know, I think it was 2000. I want to say it was 2005. I think we opened with Cocoa. I believe Wayne Younger was the quarterback for that team at that time. Might have been. Yeah, it was 05. Listen, they're just a powerhouse. They're a team that's consistent, and I think at the same time, too, I mean, Cocoa was kind of in the boat that everybody was in at that time. I mean, you had the Rockledges and the Palm Bays. They were the top dogs at that time. And now you look at Cocoa, I think the biggest difference is that they're the top dog and they just stay there. And that's what you want as a high school football program. You want to be those legacy-type programs. You want to think about the Lakelands and the St. Thomas Aquinas is obviously – St. Thomas Aquinas is a little bit different story considering how much NFL talent rolls through there, especially in South Florida. But I think for me it was just impressive to see, and I think even the better part too is that Ryan Schneider has been able to maintain it.
And do it in a different way.
Right. John Wilkinson did things his way, and they won 3 or 4. They won 4 with
him.
forward with him, and now obviously Ryan Schneider's put his touch on the program, and that's always hard because, like I said, for one, following up a coach like John Wilkinson, and then at the same time keeping the standards high. Where at Coco, I mean, at the same time too, like I said, Coco's pretty much in a tier of its own.
Yep.
Everybody's trying to get to where Coco's at, but Coco on a consistent basis, we are talking about winning state championship hardware. And again, I'm not throwing any shade at anybody, but when I was a senior, our called successful season was, 1, winning a district title, and 2, if we get to the third round of the playoffs.
Right.
Because that was huge because we never had done that. So the fact that Coco always expects, 1, to be in state semifinals.
Yep.
And 2,
16 straight years.
16 straight years, and 2, to be playing for state championship hardware speaks volumes to that program. And like I said, they're pretty much in a class of their own.
What a pick Ryan Schneider was, though, as the head football coach, because I want to go back and talk about that for a minute.
You were here for that. I wasn't.
Yeah, what a pick it was. Because, I mean, I'm not going to lie. At first, they had a lot of people scratching their heads. Who the hell's this guy? They knew of his success at St. Thomas. They knew he was over at MCC with Stacy Sizemore and worked with an offense that was prolific with Joaquin Collazo and company. But to go from that to the Coco, but he came in, the expression, didn't give two you-know-whats. He turned a program around that was running the football from 70% of the time to passing it 30% of the time in 2017, and a state championship loss to Jacksonville Reigns, to a program that threw the football 70% of the time and ran it 30% of the time, and they got the same result. They went right back to the state championship game. Now, they didn't beat Jacksonville Reigns, but you know what? They haven't missed a beat.
No.
So kudos to Ryan Schneider and his staff on what he has done and the way he has done it. Now, there are some questions for me this year. The first thing I'll say out of the gate is I do believe that Coco repeats as 2S state champ. I just think they do. But I think there are a lot more factors involved this year than they were last year. Arguably, nobody is better in Florida on the offensive line. I don't know that I've ever heard of a state championship team that returns every single solitary starter, but the Tigers do, and they're bigger, stronger, faster, and better.
That's impressive.
It is. Now, even at wide receiver, Nach, they lose. You look at what Coco lost last year from the wide receiving position offensively, and you go, well, they're in trouble. They lose 2,450 yards and 28 touchdowns to Graduation and Day Farmer, who's now at MCC with Nate Hooks. And you go, well, man, I don't know. But what you forget is the only person that coming back to this football team that scored in the state championship game last year is a wide receiver. Everybody that scored a point in that state championship game last year, from the kicker Mao Saito to the defensive back Caleb Dobbs, who had a pick six, is gone. With the exception, let me make sure make sure that of C.J. Bragg. C.J. Bragg will be a senior this year. Now, the big question mark on the offensive side of the football for me is 2 things. Can the Coco Tigers run the football better than they did to start the year last year? And Adam Franco will look at me and laugh when I asked this question, because he did last year. Run the football? We're going to run football. I'm kidding with him, but that's what he said to me, and he was right. In the end, he was right. They still ran it for 1,450 yards, but when you think of Coco Tiger football, you think of a little more than that. But this year, they don't have a senior quarterback in Blake Boda. They don't have a senior quarterback in Davin Widener. They've got a sophomore quarterback and Brady Hart, who's transferred from Melbourne. Big kid, tough kid.
6'4". That's not
he's going to
find.
He's going to be well protected. But I think when you look at this schedule to start the year, it's not unthinkable that they lose two of those first 3 games. Jones, Venice, and St. Thomas. I thought they were going to beat St. Thomas last year. until I got there. All right?
You and I should know better. We saw St. Thomas at another point, too, and we thought Vieira was going to be
We
able to play
did,
with us.
and we said so. And Ryan Schneider made us pay for that one too, didn't he? Because he was the OC. He played that video on the bus of us making our predictions for that state championship game, and it pumped up their offense. Who, oh, by the way, I'm thinking of Bowles. So I don't know if they beat. Look, they played Venice, who was a state champion runner-up last year, the state champion the year before. They got O'Galley, then they got Treasure Coast and Seminole. Is it unfathomable to think that this team, if Brady Hart doesn't progress as they need him to, by the time they've played 6 games, could be 2-4? Or is everything we're hearing about Brady, Hart, going to come to fruition, in your opinion?
Well, I think
You've talked to some people. You're from Melbourne.
But like I said, I haven't seen what this kid's done. I know what Hunter Turner did at Melbourne, but like I said, I think Brady Hart, for one, there is a lot of pressure, and he's a young kid.
Yeah.
But at the same time, too, it feels like these young kids embrace it more than they do when I was young.
They swallow it.
Yeah, they pretty much do. But I think the biggest thing is that there are a lot of starters around him. So like I said, I think this is the biggest thing. Just don't turn the ball over.
Right.
And I think that's what's going to be asked of him going into those early games, especially in the season. Because they have a lot back on defense, and I'm sure that defense is going to be looking to create turnovers.
Up front they do.
Okay. And so that means creating pressure and creating sacks, and that is one of the biggest things for any successful team to have is if you got a defensive line getting after quarterbacks and creating all kinds of problems. That's how you create turnovers and create big plays in the back end of your defense.
I don't care what they are by the 6th game of the year. And don't get me wrong, they're still the best team in 2S in my opinion. But, my issue is this, listen, Blake Boda got the hell beat out of him in the first half of that St. Thomas game last year. I mean, Boda struggled to start the year last year, but you could instantly see Blake Boda from the first half of that St. Thomas game to the second half of that St. Thomas game, took what happened to him in that first half, and it was 21-21 football game in the second half. It was a completely different game. That's a senior quarterback. So, but there is precedence to this. And what I mean by that is when Ryan Schneider took over in 2018, his quarterback from Vero Beach that transferred to Cocoa was DJ Arroyo. And DJ Arroyo was a sophomore quarterback. So Adam and Coach Schneider, they have experience at getting young quarterbacks through this, which is why I really don't think it's going to be an issue. Do I think that Cocoa is going to start the year 3-0? Hell no. Not with that schedule, I don't. Some of the greatest Cocoa teams of all time, could have started the season 3-0. But I do think this is a 7-3 football team this year during the regular season, and I do think that they repeat as 2S state champs. The other issue I think this team has this year is in that defensive secondary. And much like I believe the offense is going to have to rely heavily on that offensive line to start the season and running the football and giving Hart a lot of protection to gain his confidence and build his things. And look, real quick on the offense, I know that Coach Schneider and Coach Franco aren't going to ask Hart to do anything he's not comfortable or capable of. They're going to know, and they're going to work well within the confines of his games. And by the way, I said what the Tigers lost in the receiving department. Let's make sure we understand that they get back this year some really great wide receivers. Javen Boggs, who's an Ohio State commit. They got a couple of transfers in. They get C.J. Bragg, Nicky Teeter. They still have the best receiving core in the county, hands down, bar none. So Hart can count on them as well. On defense, they got a great coordinator in Matt Diesel. And Diesel's going to have his hands full to start the year because he's going to have to rely very heavily on his front seven because he loses 4 D1 players in that secondary. Cedric Hawkins is now at Ohio State. Caleb Dobbs, the list goes on and on. But he certainly has it up front. You look at that defensive line. You get back Pee Wee Robinson, who led the team for tackles with a loss last year. Cedric Walker, 34 tackles, 7 tackles for a loss. To me, the best defensive player in the county. If we did preseason awards, to me, my preseason BSN Defensive Player of the Year award preseason would be Samadre Hawkins. That would be my guy right there, Samadre Hawkins. And don't forget Davion Parham, who also returns this year, who caused that fumble that Lauren Ward recovered in the state championship game last year, returns as well. Oh, by the way, so does Lauren Ward. So I think that front seven is fine. There are going to be some issues early if they come across a team that can throw the football. If this Venice team is the team Coco took on a couple of years ago when me and Chris Bonanno went over and filmed it in a hurricane, okay, because they wouldn't call the game. If they can throw the football in that, like they did that year, then they'll be in trouble in that game, okay? But I think until that front seven's going to have to carry that secondary for the first couple of games of the year until Diesel gets them in focus. But I see 7-3 in a 2S state championship.
I mean, I'm really excited to see, for one, just see what this Cocoa Tiger team looks like for my own eyes. Because, like I said, I've been out for the last couple of years.
Right.
But I think that's what's key for me is just seeing what they do this year and how they because, like I said, I saw with some of your questions, and I think obviously the biggest one's quarterback. How much does the quarterback really drive everything? I mean, you look at that Netflix series. I don't know if you've had a chance.
I've watched the whole thing.
I've only watched episode 1, but it just shows you how valuable these guys are. And to have, I think that's going to be the biggest driver for them. That's not a lot of pressure for a sophomore quarterback, and I think it's just going to be really interesting to see how this team comes together. And they also got some guys coming in that are going to be really interesting as well. So
when it comes to that Netflix series, I get Mahomes. I get Cousins. The one I couldn't wrap my head around is Mariota.
Well, I think Peyton Manning wanted to kind of give it different tiers,
Yeah, no, he definitely got it.
Depends on which quarterbacks also said yes to this series.
He definitely got it in Marcus Mariota. All right, let's take a look at the Heritage Panthers, and their preview will come out sometime this week. We'll have 3 of them released this week. Heritage will be out either tomorrow or Tuesday. Then we got Melbourne's coming, and then Palm Bay. So we're kind of moving up. We'll do Bayside after I talk to Coach Miller, get more of a feel for what's going on with his team. But, all right, the Heritage Panthers, new head football coach, Michael Benson. Listen, Mark Ainsley stays on staff as the defensive coordinator there. I think, Nach, with Coach Benson's experience, if you're going to replace a 9-year guy, let me say this. If you're going to replace a 9-year guy who was the longest tenured head coach, by the way, here's your trivia question for the night. Now that Mark Ainsley is gone, right, last year Nate Hooks has moved from Holy Trinity to NCC, snapping his 8-year streak of consecutive years as a head coach. Who is now the longest tenured head coach in Brevard County?
Do we get to come back to that one?
We can come back, but I want you to think about it. You know the answer, and it's pretty obvious. And I'll give you a hint. You've already said his name.
No, I was about to say, I got a feeling that never mind. It's not going to take me long. Ryan Schneider.
Nope.
Oh.
No. But you have said his name today. We'll come back to it. I want you to think about it. All right, let's talk about Heritage. You brought this to my attention a couple of weeks ago, and it caused me to take a pretty deep dive on it. You want to talk about it? You said you might as well start, or James Hines from Melbourne said you might as well start calling what's going on in the state of Florida the transfer portal in high school.
Transfer season.
Transfer season.
Free agency, if you will.
Nobody in the county benefited more than did Heritage, and that's the God's honest truth. They got 16 transfers this offseason. 16 of them. And based on what I saw from the spring game, I think the biggest question marks for Heritage this year is going to be quarterback. Everybody might say, well, Alan, you got a 4-year starter there in Joe Tenta. I know. And Heritage is coming in studio this week, by the way. I got Tenta and a couple of his teammates coming in this week. And one of the questions I'm going to ask Joe Tenta is, you've heard the whispers. Hey, I know he has. I know he's heard the whispers. How is he going to put it all aside this year, concentrate and focus on his final year of high school? What has he done differently to prepare for this season, which to me, this is it right here. This is Joe Tenta's year. So I want to talk to him about that. Look, what Heritage has returning, what they have transferring in, this is going to be a damn good football team. Somebody asked me the other day, somebody said, Alan, do you really buy into all the Heritage hype? And I said, well, let me say this. When you get that many transfers and you return this much talent and you got a great coaching staff like they have, I mean, they got Eddie Mays down there doing some offense, calling some plays with Michael Benson, Mark Ainsley running the defense. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Nach, I mean, they got a hell of a staff down there. Yeah, I'm going to buy into it because watching them play in the spring, they're fast. They're physical. They got after a Vero Beach team that I thought took them a little lightly to start with, but quickly realized they were no joke. The only reason that Vero won the spring game is because I'll say it, Heritage got a bum rap on a call when they put the JV teams in at the end. This game was so intense that they didn't actually put the JV squads in until after the game ended and extended it a little bit. So, but I do buy into this Heritage hype because I think they have players everywhere you need to in high school. They got a great secondary, love their linebacking core. I think Tena's going to come through this year. Love their running backs and receivers. My only question mark is it is every year with Heritage for the last couple of years is their offensive line. Last year, I was told they were young, they were gelling, they were moved, This has got to be the year. They've got to put it. All eyes in this county are watching them this year, Nach.
I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, this is a team that's got a lot of guys that are, that are extremely talented and extremely big. I mean, they got one guy coming in that's 6'7". They've got multiple receivers that are coming in. I mean, they've got talent across the board, and obviously the expectations are going to be extremely high for the Heritage Panthers, and so I do buy into the hype. I think Heritage is going to be a really good team. This is a team that's not I mean, the regular season is going to be pivotal, but what this team is building towards is the postseason and getting deep in what is – usually they were 6A. I don't know what they are now in terms of what their playoff – postseason situation is, like who they see. I know a lot of times I remember a couple of years ago they saw Miami Central early in the playoffs.
Doesn't happen anymore with Metro and Suburb. Okay, they don't play those teams.
Okay, so I'm still learning a lot here. So like I said, I think for what Heritage is doing, I think they are building for the teams that they are going to see in the postseason. You
and I called their biggest heartbreaking football playoff football loss was the toughest football game I think I've ever seen a Brevard County team lose against an out-of-county team. 2-point conversion. I was standing right there in the corner. You were doing play-by-play. I was doing the on-the-field. And I stood right there as the winning 2-point conversion was dropped, Nach. I'll never forget it, man. It was right in his hands. Look, they play 8 playoff teams from a year ago this season. And I looked at their schedule, and I don't mean any disrespect to any other Brevard County team. But when I look at their schedule, I see 9 wins.
9 wins.
I see 9 wins. Now, how long it takes 17 transfers, by the way, 17 transfers to gel with the likes of Joe Tena, Tayshawn Benson, Tayshawn Townsend, Hunter Raymond, Ryan Hungerford, guys like that, Kavaris Cohen, Devin McDonald, who is also on the watch list as Defensive Player of the Year. Ramir Davis, King Moore. They've got a bevy of talented football players that we have seen tear this county up for years in youth football and have done really, really well in their high school careers. They need to do some really great things this year because if they do, to me, this is a 9-1 football team, 8-2 at the worst. They are the clear favorites to capture this district, in my opinion, because The three other teams in their district, two other teams in their district this year, they're better than Harmony. We know Melbourne is going through some rebuild, and Vieira was 0-10 last season. So who expects Vieira to go from 0-10 to 7-3 in a year? Okay, I mean, so that's their district: Harmony, Heritage, and Melbourne. So they should be hands down district champs, right? Host the playoff game. You get that first playoff game at home. You get a big win, like I know they will down there, with that band, which is still the best marching band, which is still the best in Brevard County. Man, I'm telling you, Nach, I expect this team, this Heritage Panthers team, and I'm going to call it now, to be my 2021 Merritt Island Mustangs. I'm not saying they're going all the way to the 4S state championship, because 4S is tough when you get to those regional finals, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me to see Heritage playing for a regional championship or in a Final Four. That's how good I think they should be this year.
But that's the reason why I think that they've done what they've done, and it's the amassed talent that they have, is because that is what they're building towards, and getting over that hump and getting to December, essentially playing in December. That is what all these teams want to do by the time we get to that point. Because, like I said, the regular season's fun. It's great. It tells us a lot. But the postseason is what really matters to all these teams. And I think Heritage definitely has a lot of horses in the stable to make some noise this year. And I really can't wait to see what they do with them.
They start off at Satellite. Then they host Palm Bay, a team they lost to last year. Then they host Centennial. They go to Oviedo. They host Merritt Island. They go to Vieira. They go to Central Fort Pierce. They go to Melbourne. They host Harmony, and then they close it out with a game against Bayside. Their combined record of their opponents, the record of their opponents last year that they faced this year was 56-54. That's a 509 mark. Certainly nothing like Coco's or Rockledge's, where Coco's is at 649 winning percentage. But look, again, I don't think it's too much to put those. I put these expectations on this team last year, and I felt they performed okay. They're going to need to get more from the passing department in terms of yards. They're going to need to continue to run the football. And if they can do that, they're going to play defense. What I saw, they're just going to play defense. They're just too damn fast not to.
Right. No, it's going to be. It's like I said. That's what's so exciting as we get to this point, because just you and I talking about just the potentials, the questions, all of these types of things, and they're going to get those answers here pretty soon, because they start camp. I mean, I don't know what you call it for high school football. I still call it camp. But, yeah. But they start camp here in a couple of weeks, and I think we're going to be really interested to see what those answers develop.
I see you got the Flathead football jersey on tonight.
Yeah.
When do they start up there?
So that's interesting, and I bet a lot of football coaches here would be really interested to see if they could ever get away with this.
Go ahead.
So in the month of June, football teams, coaches, players are allowed to do team activities through the entire month. They have 1 week where they can put pads on. They can go to multiple camps across the region. So they can take a team camp. They can go to the Idaho camp. They can go to Washington State. They can go to Washington if they want to. And they can put pads on, and they're actually almost like competing in a jamboree-type game.
Gotcha.
So they are allowed that time. Now, from July, they can't do anything. They can do off-season workouts. That's about all they can do. But in June, they get 1 week where they can put pads on, and they call it camp. And then they can do a whole bunch of team stuff. They can take all their teams, don't have to worry about any issues with organizations and things of that nature. But then they start in August, like the first couple weeks of August. They do 2-a-days pretty much the first week, and then the next week is pretty much your regular schedule, because they actually play games the first regular season game, because they don't do a kickoff classic and they don't have a bye week. But the first regular season game the first game is before the first week of school, which is usually around Labor Day or the week before Labor Day.
Here's the question: we sweat our asses off up here broadcasting till probably, August, September, probably till about the middle of October. Then we catch a break. When do you have to start putting the winter jacket on up there broadcasting?
I mean, probably it varies, because I've had snow October 3rd, so I've had that. I'll tell you this: one of the coldest, my two coldest games I've ever called One was a state semifinal game, which Flathead won, which was epic. But the press box had no heat. It was just simply a wooden box that was stacked up 2 stories and no insulation, no anything.
Sounds
so it
like
was
old
cold.
Cocoa Beach.
And all I had was my jacket on. The next game is in Butte, Montana. And Butte Stadium is absolutely gorgeous. Like, they put it right up against all that old brick. So it's it just got that, it's a field right in the middle of all the brick buildings that you see. You just kind of think of in the 1940s. So it's absolutely gorgeous from a just looking at it. But visiting radio has to go on top of the press box. So broadcasting a game in late October where Butte also has the winds just wide open there. So you get the wind on top
Inside their
of
minds.
Yeah. All I get is 3 stories up, and I got nothing but wind. I'm trying to keep equipment from freezing over at that point. So, yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. But, yeah, no, probably mid-October I got to start wearing jackets.
Absolutely unbelievable, man. Real quick, I want to talk about Wimbledon today because, as a kid, Nach, I used to watch the Wimbledon finals. I remember them occurring a little earlier in the month, like around the 4th of July or whatever. But
yeah, I was going to say, because it seems a little late because the U.S. Open can't be too far away.
No, it's not. September is when, the end of August is when they start. But, watching, I for some reason, and I don't know why, but I watched a lot of Wimbledon this year. And I just did working, sitting there with the TV on. But Carlos Alcaraz is your Wimbledon champion. Listen, Carlos did not start well today at all. Mr. Alcaraz was smoked in that first set, 6-1. But then he and Djokovic would trade sets all the way to the 5th when he would Alcaraz broke Djokovic in the 3rd set is what it was, I believe. Broke him in the 3rd set and just hung on from that point on. And Djokovic just couldn't catch him. I mean, the moment wasn't too big. He's 20 years old. The moment wasn't too big for him. Just a phenomenal, phenomenal performance. But I think what was really, really cool about this is when you look at what Alcaraz knowing. Now listen to some of these numbers about Djokovic, because some of these numbers with him and Wimbledon are just mind-numbing. Obviously, he was going for his 5th straight Wimbledon championship. He had notable streaks that were snapped with Djokovic's loss. 45 wins on center court. That's the longest streak by anyone since it opened in 1922. 34 wins at Wimbledon, the 3rd longest streak among men in the Open era. 27 match wins, tied for the 3rd longest streak among men in the Open era. Alcaraz becomes the 5th youngest man at time of his 2nd major title in the Open era, the 3rd man in the Open era to win Wimbledon before turning 21. Boris Becker and Bjorn Borg both did it. Alcaraz becomes the 2nd youngest player to defeat Djokovic in a major. So congratulations to Alcaraz. I thought Djokovic was extremely classy in defeat, and Alcaraz extremely, like a 20-year-old, he was phenomenal. He had that. He was not arrogant. He was just class, just pure class. What you want to see from your champion, and acknowledge the great champ that Djokovic is. This will fire Djokovic up, and we'll see what happens in Flushing Meadows. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you this much: it makes me think about think about that scene in Miracle.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell's talking about if you put a puck behind the Russian goalie, you better hold on to it and keep it because they don't get past him very often. If you've beaten Djokovic in a final, you
Especially
better enjoy
Wimbledon.
it. Yeah, especially Wimbledon. If you enjoy it because you don't get too many opportunities to get a win against Djokovic.
I was telling Caleb today the story about a buddy of mine that I used to work for. And I used to make, as a kid growing up, I played football, hockey, baseball, but I could play tennis, I mean, I could. And because I could serve and volley, I thought I was great at it. And I went to work for a guy at a sporting goods store who was a great tennis player at the University of Texas, nationally ranked in his day. And he used to listen to me trash talk tennis all the time. And I did it just to agitate him. And finally, one day, he says, "You want to go play some tennis?" I'm sure, let's go. So while we were warming up, I'm serving and knocking the ball back. And I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what I thought, right? Until he says, "You ready?" And the first thing that hit me was the way he said, "You ready?" The second thing that hit me was when I watched him bounce that damn ball before he served it. As soon as he threw that ball in the air and cocked that racket back, I knew my ass was in trouble. He hit that thing, and he hit that damn ball so hard at me, it hit me in the ribs. Now, this is a tennis ball. I've been hit before by plenty of things in my ribs, but he got me just right. And the first serve knocked the damn wind out of me, sent me to my knees on the ground. He jumps over the net, coming down, apologizing left and right. From that point on, I never made fun of another tennis player.
Yeah, I was about to say I was never any good at tennis, but the way they can serve and the speed in which they serve and how hard they hit that ball.
I don't say they were hitting shots today, 125 miles. How the hell do you even see that thing?
Oh, I know. I have a hard enough time seeing a baseball if I'm at the batting cage trying to catch that and hit and put contact with a bat. I don't know how those guys are hitting a tennis ball coming at that fast.
It and it certainly gave me a better appreciation for the sport because he let me know. He definitely let me know. You're watching Mouthin Off Sports Talk here tonight, brought to you by Archaic Design. I want to thank Russ and Christy and the great staff at Archaic Design. Anything you need for the home, right there, 321-956-2066, archaicdesign.com. A lot coming up this week here on BSN. When I mean a lot, I mean a lot. Coaches show Tuesday night, interviews all week long. How are you all enjoying the throwbacks that we're putting on? We reran the 2020 Barbecue Bowl on Friday night in a game which had Raheem Sanders in it. And, Coco had snapped a 3-game losing streak to Rockledge in the Barbecue Bowl. But I enjoy running those throwbacks. We're going to do something a little different this week. We might play a throwback baseball game or a softball game or something of that nature. But I think it's good content in the summer. And if everybody else can do Throwback Thursday or Fallback Friday, well, why can't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
What is it? I can't remember. Wineback Wednesday?
Wineback Wednesday.
Maybe
Walk back Wednesday. Toss it back Tuesday. Who knows? But all right, Nach, I want to talk a little baseball now before we get back to football, and then we're going to be talking college football. Coming up in college football segment, we're going to be talking about we're going to preview the SEC West tonight, and we're also going to be talking about Tennessee and their violations, and then we'll talk a little NFL football. DeAndre Hopkins signs with the Tennessee Titans. Didn't see that one coming, and we'll still yet to come our Angels and our Idiots of the Week. Mine is the same person. So
I am looking forward to seeing who you have. As
right.
both
Yeah.
Angel and Idiot.
So will a lot of other people. Anyway, let's talk a little bit of baseball. The All-Star break is over. Mookie Betts, my pick to win the home run derby, sucked. I mean, it was terrible. Just terrible.
Randy Rosarina.
There you go.
I almost had it. If I could have bet, I would have almost won it.
Vlad Guerrero Jr. wins it. Caleb picked it too.
Caleb, I was going to say that's a
Caleb
pick
picked
by
Guerrero. He got it. He picked it. But I gotta say, Nach, the game was boring. It's terrible. I was hoping for a tie in the ninth inning because I didn't know. I guess I knew, but I forgot. But I didn't know that they settled it with a home run derby in extra innings. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I would have been all for that.
Oh,
Maybe they just need to do 7 innings. Well, no, because you're trying to get all the pitchers and all the guys that make it. But 7 innings of baseball and go right to that?
I was in my room screaming, tie, 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 tie. Let's go, tie this thing up. And when you know it was an Oriole pitcher that gave up the lead. But, hey, it happens, and it definitely happened. But, it was listen, I love the home run derby. I thought it was good again this year. I thought Adley Rutschman, who I wanted to pick but didn't pick just because I knew if I picked him he would lose. Got knocked out in the first round anyway. But, man, he probably thought, man, I'm going to, I got 27 home runs in the first round. I'm good to go. No, he didn't. He was knocked out with plenty of bonus time left. We have started the second half of baseball knocking. Look, we really dove into a lot of baseball last week. We really did. But I will say, as we come out of the All-Star break with the weekend games that we have this week, let me pull up this week in baseball, and you'll hear the theme music in the background. Look, Tampa Bay, 3-7 in their last 10. The two hottest teams in baseball are right there behind them, in the Orioles and the Blue Jays, who were both 8-2 in their last 10 games. The Diamondbacks, who you and I were very, very high on heading into the All-Star break, have just absolutely laid an egg. They get swept in San Diego, and they have now lost 8 of their last 10. And, obviously we've reached, your Brewers are back on top by 2 over the Reds. The Reds are 5. They've kind of cooled off. Ely De La Cruz has cooled off a little bit. See anything this weekend that concerns you, or want to go a little further into the second half here?
I was going to say, for me, I really kind of want to get into more of the second half, just because, again, the first 3 games out of the All-Star break, for one, so many teams are either going to get guys back or should be getting guys back here soon, just because they get that added time. I mean, as a Brewers fan, I was thrilled. I wasn't sure how we'd come out against the Cincinnati Reds. Coming out of the All-Star break, wasn't looking all that great for us. But now we sit on top, lead by 2 games. Christian Yelich is still hitting the absolute power out of the ball right now, and he's playing well.
He's doing well, man.
And I'm loving that fact, because right now he's brought all the offense we have, especially now that Rowdy Tellez is going to be out for another 4 weeks, their first baseman, and that really hurts my fantasy baseball team. But listen, I think it's too early to tell, but I think the AL East, and we've talked about it before, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up your butt, because I know you're wearing the jersey and you're wearing the hat and all that, but the fact that
every Sunday night until they're not in a playoff spot.
Right.
Sorry.
The Orioles are 1 game back of the Rays right now. And can the Rays get healthy? That's another big question.
I think the Rays are in a lot of trouble. In fact, it'll reflect that in my power poll this week. And look, the Orioles just swept a team that was extremely hot in the Miami Marlins. They swept the Marlins this weekend. And listen, the Orioles' schedule to start the second half will tell you a lot about this team. Now, they just swept the Marlins. Coming into Camden Yards tomorrow for 4 are the Dodgers. After the Dodgers, the Orioles will hop on a plane and head down here and play Tampa for 3. They'll get back on a plane, go back to Baltimore, and play the Yankees for 4. That's a hell of a schedule to start the second half.
I was about to say, you're playing the division leader in the NL West.
Right.
You're playing the leader in your own division.
Right.
And you're playing a team that's only 4 or 5 games out of it, and they're the 5th team in your division.
Right. And the Yankees, it's unbelievable, but the Yankees are 50-44.
Look at the Red Sox. They're 8-2 in their last 10, and they're 50-44.
The team that concerns me is the Blue Jays. Now, the Orioles have got a pretty good handle on them, but I'm going to give you got your Elite 8 this week. Who's your Elite 8?
My Elite 8 really hasn't changed. I mean, I'd probably toss the Diamondbacks out. Or no, I should say I think I had the Diamondbacks in my last one, but I would say the Reds are out, and I'd toss in the Dodgers at this point. I don't think it really changes at the top. I don't think it changes until the Orioles dethrone the Rays, because I think the Rays have also found enough ways to get a couple of games here and there. But I know they're banged up, they're injured, and that's the reason why the Rays have struggled in their last 10.
I shook mine up, brother. I thought about this. I really shook it up.
3 games shake you up.
Well, listen, I got the Braves 1. I got the Orioles 2 now. Listen, since we were sitting in this chair this time last week, the Orioles have closed the gap from 4.5 to 5 to 1 game. The Rays are 3-7. They're beat to hell. I got the Dodgers 4. I catapulted the Toronto Blue Jays all the way up to 5. The one thing I was waiting to see with the Blue Jays was for them to get healthy and their bats to get going and they're back into the bullpen to stop letting them down. And all three of those things have finally begun to happen. I've got the Astros 6th. I've got the Rangers 7th. And I dropped the Marlins to 8th because there ain't no shame in getting swept by the Orioles. The Marlins, I'll tell you what kind of team the Marlins are. You know, they're going into the final game of the series today. They're losing 5-0 in the 9th inning. And damn near won the game. I mean, they scored 4 runs in the 9th inning, and by luck of the draw, the Orioles were able to get that final out. But, you know, the Blue Jays scared me coming in. I thought they were the one team that could possibly win this division that nobody was talking about. I still think that because they're only 6 back, plenty of baseball to play. The good news is the Orioles have already played them a series in Baltimore and a series in Toronto, and the Orioles have already taken 4 out of 6 from them. So at this point, I'm just hoping they beat up on the Rays when they play them. So there you have it. But that's Major League Baseball. Shohei Ohtani thing has been a little quiet, and we will obviously get into that a little bit more. As we get closer to the trade deadline. The Yankees, by the way, today, here's a little statistic on them. They led 3-1 in the 8th inning and 7-5 in the 11th inning today. They lost the game 8-7. It's the first loss in Yankees history where they had multiple leads of 2+ runs in the 8th inning or later and lost. Pretty impressive.
I was about to say. I mean, and you know pressure's cooking in New York because Cashman's already fired one guy.
Yeah.
And it's only the middle of the season, so pressure is cooking down there in the Bronx.
Let's turn our attention and our focus to the National Football League before we close out with our SEC West preview. Nach, the Tennessee Titans' leading receiver last year was Robert Woods. He had 527 yards, and he was cut earlier this offseason. Okay? So, obviously, oh, by the way, those 527 yards were the 4th fewest by a team's leading receiver in the last 15 years. So,
wow.
To say that the Titans needed help in their passing game doesn't have anything to do with Ryan Tannehill.
No, not much.
But today they signed DeAndre Hopkins. And I didn't see this coming, Nach.
It's about
didn't.
the money.
Yeah, it was a lot of it. What's your thoughts on this?
I mean, listen, I think that DeAndre Hopkins decided to go with the fact that he wanted to get the bag one more time. And can't say that I blame him. But I would have thought at this point in his career, he would have gone with a team that he can go try and win a ring with. Because that's the only thing that's missing in his, in his accolades. He doesn't have the ring yet. He hasn't been really close to the ring at all. I mean, I think D-Hop made it to the wild card. Maybe the Texans went to a division round. That's about it. But he hasn't sniffed one yet. I think it makes it interesting. I think the Titans maybe become the clear-cut second team to Jacksonville. But, again, what do you get? And can Tannehill stay healthy? That's another big question for the Titans. Obviously, we're already talking about Malik Willis and Will Levis, how that's going to play out because Malik Willis is fighting for a roster spot. But I'm a little surprised that DeAndre Hopkins decided to stay in the AFC South, or go back to it, I should say, and the fact that he went with the Titans. You know,
this is a 2-year, $26 million deal with $3 million in incentives. That's if you're $13 million a year is not enough for an aging wide receiver. He can make an additional $250,000 if he catches 65 balls, an additional $500,000 if he catches 75, an additional $750,000 if he hits 85, and another $1 million if he catches 95 balls. He catches 95 balls, the Titans are going to the Super Bowl. $250,000.
I love that stipulation.
$250,000 if he has 750 yards, and he'll pick up $1 million if he gets over 1,050. He picks up an additional $1 million if he has 10 touchdowns this year. Listen, I don't know. Good for the Titans. They needed a wide receiver last year. Hopkins, 64 receptions, targeted 96 times, 717 yards. If you're laying out incentive money, you're feeling pretty good about not having to pay the touchdown aspect of that because he only had 3 of those last year. But, good for the Titans, I guess. I didn't see it coming. He visited them back on June the 11th. The Titans put him in a suite for CMA Fest, Country Music Association Festival, put him in a big suite in the stadium and really pulled out all the stops for him. Guess he's a big country music fan because he's going to hear a hell of a lot of it from now on.
No, I mean, and I think the fact that the Titans were willing to do that for him, I think also probably made him feel a little bit more towards signing with the Tennessee Titans, because obviously it seemed to come down to Tennessee or New England. Obviously, everybody had Cleveland and Kansas City in there. Buffalo, too. Everybody thought maybe he'd go to Buffalo. And I really thought he would, too. I really thought because, you add another dynamic receiver to Buffalo and Josh Allen, it makes, I think the Bills, it puts them right on par with the Kansas City Chiefs. But surprise move. But my question is does DeAndre Hopkins actually, does this move by the Titans actually work this time? They grabbed Randy Moss after the Patriot Randy Moss, and that failed miserably. They grabbed Julio Jones. Julio Jones didn't pan out. I think they were still paying him money last year, I'm pretty sure, when he was playing for Tampa. So I'm very curious to see if this aging receiver actually works out in favor for the Tennessee Titans in terms of actually helping them win ball games.
Tomorrow is the franchise tag deadline at 4 o'clock. It'll be interesting to see what goes on with players like Saquon Barkley. One player you won't have to worry about, and I thought this was a hell of a job by the Jaguars. The Jaguars put the franchise tag on tight end Evan Ingram.
Yep.
And then today, per Ian Rappaport rap sheet, sources say that they sign him to a deal worth $41.25 million and includes a $24 million fully guaranteed contract. Evan received the franchise tag, which would have been worth $11.345 million a year earlier this offseason. Ingram set career highs last year in catches with 73, yards with 766 to go along with 4 touchdowns. They were the most catches and receiving yards by a tight end in a single season for the Jags in franchise history, which surpassed the mark set by the great Kyle Brady back in 2000. Love this deal for Jacksonville.
I think this is good for them. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence really liked going to him in those tough spots, so I think this is a great deal, and I think this only helps Jacksonville. Again, I think Jacksonville's made the case. They are the clear-cut team in the AFC South, and listen, the expectations are high now for all of them, and great to see that because now Jacksonville can just focus about getting on training camp. They don't want to deal with the headaches that come with worrying about that because obviously, Saquon Barkley is going to be the headline tomorrow. He's going to be, all right, hey, the Giants going to be able to get a deal done. Will Saquon Barkley play in Week 1 if a deal hasn't been reached? So it's going to be really interesting to see what the deadline does. But obviously this is a good move for Jacksonville, good young player. Again, a former Giant too.
That's a great segue to what I want to talk about finally in the NFL before we move on to wrap up the show with college football. The post I put up earlier this week on my personal Facebook page about Melvin Gordon's post, which you see now on the screen, that says, it's so tough for running backs right now. It's literally the worst position to play in the NFL right now. It literally sucks. And it does, Nach. The league has become, let me pull this post up because most of the statistics worth stating are in this post, this article I wrote. If you haven't been paying attention to football over the last 10 years, even if you even if you haven't been paying attention to football over the last 10 years, you could see this coming with running backs. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is not new. And I tell parents and young players all the time that tear it up in youth league football, learn how to play another position. You can play running back, but learn how to become a great defensive back and make sure if you want to be a running back at a high level, you learn how to catch the football and you continuously build up that speed. Because if you can't catch the football and you're not fast, you're done. You're not going to be a running back in the NFL these days.
I was about to say, and if you're going to try even going for the route of the power back, which is almost all but died, that's going to be even tougher these days. Who would you consider a power back at this point?
Derrick Henry's the only one I know left.
Yeah, Derrick would be the only one. But and that's just by sheer size.
But there used to be a day in the 80s, in my day, right? Dickerson, Marcus Allen, Dorsett, Roger Craig, Walter Payton. Barry Sanders, Terrell Davis, Marshall Faulk, Eddie George. All those guys played within 10 years of each other in the 80s and 90s. Emmett Smith, he played forever. I thought Emmett stayed too long. That's why I ended up breaking Walter Payton's record. And then, of course, you're going to get exceptions like we just mentioned in Derrick Henry. You're going to get the Baltimore Ravens, who with Lamar Jackson want to run the football and break NFL. I get it. It's going to happen. But don't remember this. Only 5 teams ran the ball greater than 51% of the time last year. And all 5 of those teams' offenses, with the exception of, the Eagles ran the ball 50% of the time. But all 5 of those teams' offenses were horrific in the bottom third of the league. Running the football just isn't where it's at anymore. And you mentioned that series, that Netflix series about the quarterbacks. You can even see it in there with Minnesota, who's got a great running back in a Dalvin Cook, who still doesn't have a home yet, by the way.
Nope.
Okay? All Minnesota wanted to do was throw the football with Kirk Cousins. This is not going back. I don't know what to tell these guys, but I would say this: it hurts my heart for guys like Ja'Shawn Corbin, who was an outstanding running back. 20 years ago, Ja'Shawn Corbin's a second, third round pick in the NFL. Javian Hawkins a little later. Hawkins would have went maybe in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, but he'd be on an NFL roster if he can stay healthy. And it's going to be interesting to see former Rockledge Raider standout, now Arkansas running back Raheem Sanders. See, I think Raheem Sanders has an outstanding chance to be an exception to this rule because he's big, he's fast as hell, and he can catch the football.
I mean, listen, I think with the way running backs are utilized, I think you're absolutely right in every aspect of what you just said in terms of pass catching. You got to learn how to block too. But here's the deal. I think the way the NFL has gone, it has gone the way of passing the football. So when we have gone this route, then yes, the running back position has been devalued because we're not talking about guys rushing. Well, I mean, I'm trying to think. Maybe I know we've had 1,500, 1,600 rushers recently, but again, we're not talking about
not at that level.
No. Well, you also don't have guys that seem to last that long.
10 years ago, what was the first unquestionable first pick in every fantasy draft?
A running back.
What is it now? I haven't played fantasy football seriously for a couple of years.
But I think it's still
running back.
I think it's still running back, and I think it's still running back. I mean, it depends on the league. Because there's so many variations to fantasy football now.
Right.
But it's still running back. But wide receivers have now really encroached in on that space because it used to be first round. I mean, the first 6 picks are running backs. First 8 picks are running backs. Now you're talking about taking, all right, Justin Jefferson.
Right.
Tyreek Hill.
Right.
Trying to think who else is a dynamic receiver off the top of my head.
The guy from Minnesota.
Yeah, but it's Jefferson.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah. A.J. Brown. I mean, those are the 3 guys that I think of automatically that I could go in the first round. So I think it's definitely your pass catchers just because we are seeing the sheer volume in which they are getting the football.
Here's an interesting tidbit I looked up right in this article. 37 receivers were drafted in 2020, 34 in 2021, 38 in 2022, right? I'm not sure how many were drafted this year. Back in the 1980s, teams selected an average of 45 running backs per NFL draft, and that never, ever dropped below 30 in the 90s. Over the last 2 decades, the average is 22 to 24 running backs a draft. And so
and we're not talking
you couldn't
about guys,
see that coming with just that number. You're not paying attention.
No, I was about to say, I think until an offensive system changes the landscape or if they change the rules back, I can't wait for the day when Roger Goodell is no longer commissioner of the NFL and someone gets on the rules committee that actually, or the competition committee that actually has some sense for defense. I think until they switch back, I just don't see that the running back position is going to ever change in this regard. Now, it might change, but I think the rules have to change for one, and I think, too, let me ask you this question. Do you think it's just – we talked about those guys, Barry Sanders, Walter Payton, all those type of guys, Emmitt Smith. Are we looking at more of the fact that we just don't – because we're seeing such a superstar talent of quarterbacks.
That's it right there.
But here's my question. Is it because the level of quarterback play, are we in the golden era of quarterbacking? Or is it just that we just don't have I mean, there are talented running backs. There's no question. We're just not seeing the Barry Sanders, the Walter Paytons, those type of guys, the Emmitt Smiths. Is that what it is?
That's a great point, Nach, because that's a hell of a point. Because, I mean, I think when you look at this, you know, you're looking at teams that are still putting up decent rushing numbers, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of yards per carry, we're talking, the Cocoa Tigers are a perfect example of this, right? I mean, look, they're still putting up 6 yards a carry, still averaging 140 yards rushing a game. But, you look at the NFL and you still see these numbers, but a lot of times those numbers are coming from, you got quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes who can rush for 60, 70 yards a game. You got Lamar Jackson. You got Justin Fields now. Those guys have literally taken away that they're two players on the field.
Well, and I think also because the speed of the game. What offenses are running 80 plays nearly?
Have the offensive lines gotten any? I mean, everything starts up front, right? And the offensive linemen have become so much more talented. Their footwork is so much quicker, so much faster. I mean, you played up front. You see these guys.
I got run over by a bunch of those guys. But I think to a degree, for one, I think that's also troubling too because I don't know that the talent of the offensive linemen that are coming out of the draft are necessarily, yes, a lot of offenses are pass blocking. So pass blocking is definitely improved because college football, how often are we seeing, passing and how that's really taken off in the college football landscape. So I don't think that and also too, look at how finicky holding penalties are and how that has changed and all
and
those
the rules.
I think the rules have really limited, one, the way offensive linemen block in the run game and what they're allowed to do. Because, you go back and you watch some Terrell Davis runs. Watch some of those Broncos offensive linemen. I think Mark Schlereth. When you look at what they did that weren't called flags, today's NFL, that's a flag. That's 10 yards.
The Washington Redskins used to have, in my lifetime, the best offensive line I've ever seen belonged to the Washington Redskins. Joe Jacoby and those guys, they had a group called the Hogs. The original Hogs that used to block for John Riggins, Joe Washington, those guys. And they were just mean sons of guns. They were nasty, Nach. Oh, yeah. And you get that now. The Eagles' offensive line was very impressive last year. But you're right. You don't get that nastiness you used to see back in the day. And, I hate to keep saying back in the day, because I sound like the old guy that says, get off my lawn. But it's part of the change that we're sitting here talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, what about the rules that made it for receivers, easier for receivers as a defensive back? You can't touch a receiver coming off the line.
Exactly.
So why not throw the ball if my receiver?
If you already have a 30%, all right, Caleb's in the background making a point where he says, if you have created rules to make pass catching earlier, and you already start off with a 30% advantage in the passing game because of the rules, throw the damn ball.
How did the Netflix series for quarterbacks open? They opened with the fact Kirk Cousins talks about the fact that they changed the rule when Tom Brady got hit below the knee.
He's reading a book to his kid.
Yeah, they changed the rules. And I think that's ultimately what it is because I think at the same time, too, I think when you're talking, remember, and you're making this point earlier, offenses are running 82 plays, 78 plays, 76 plays. Go back to Barry Sanders and Walter Payton. How many plays were they really running? 40? Right. 50 plays. So you're talking about 30 less plays a game. You're talking about hundreds of plays over a season. And less wear and tear.
And offensive game plans no longer give two you-know-whats if they chew up clock. They don't care about time of possession anymore. Look at that AFC playoff game a couple of years ago between the Bills and the Chiefs. How many touchdowns did they score in the game's final 2 minutes?
Right.
You get down to football. It was funny. You're going to come across an episode in this Netflix series, The Quarterback. There's 39 seconds to go in a half. The Jaguars are playing the Chiefs in the playoffs. And Patrick Mahomes, of course, is mic'd up. And he says, and I kid you not, all right, guys, let's go. There's 39 seconds. Let's go score. And I thought, that's just crazy.
Well, for the Chiefs move that football, they definitely can.
That's just crazy.
It is crazy. And like I said, but I think that is the changing landscape of the
And that's
the
the
NFL.
mindset.
Yeah, no, that is the mindset. And like I said, you're talking about quarterbacks that are coming in the league younger that are able to do all these things. we're seeing guys that are getting recruited to college football that are now attempting jump passes. Now, I know this is frustrating a lot of quarterback coaches. I've seen their comments in the comments section about how they don't like seeing high school quarterbacks doing these acrobatic jumps to throw the football 60 yards down the field. You're never going to use it in a game. Because I know Patrick Mahomes did that one time where he was completely, horizontal, and he still threw the ball in the end zone. It fell incomplete. But I think that the level of quarterback play is what's diminished the running backs and the game plans, and the fact that we are running offenses now at 82 plays a game versus what it used to be, which was 40 to 50.
You're right. No, you're absolutely right. All right, Nach. We move on to college football, and
To a team that likes to run the ball.
right. To a team that may have to do nothing but run the football to kill the time that they're facing. Has Jeremy Pruitt put the Tennessee Volunteers in a pickle, if you will? Tennessee avoided a bowl ban after the NCAA Committee on Infractions. You know, when I read this article originally, the first thing that struck me was, hey, the NCAA still exists. Tennessee avoided a bowl ban after the NCAA Committee on Infractions found the program responsible for more than, you ready for this? 200 individual violations, including 18 level 1 in nature. Now, I'm quite sure if you go back and look at SMU, you probably won't find this many violations, but a program that ultimately picked up the death penalty. I'll just say that as I continue to update the story here. Former coach Jeremy Pruitt was hit with a 6-year show cause order. Now, if you're not familiar with what a show cause order is, should the head coach become employed, or anybody that's given a show cause order by the NCAA, means that should they become employed in an athletically related position at an NCAA school during their show cause order, they shall be subject to a suspension from 100% of the first season, or from 100% of the season, and the school subject to NCAA violations, which means Pruitt's unhireable for 6 years, okay? Essentially is what that means. Now, in lieu of a bowl ban, which Tennessee should have gotten but did not, the football program will be put on probation for 5 years, pay an $8 million fine, so money talks and you know what walks, and they will be subject to an independent compliance review, whoop-de-doo, of the program each year. Additionally, there will be a legislated fine of $500,000, $5,000, which is 3% of the football budget, and an additional fine to recoup money earned while the program was ineligible during the 2020 Gator Bowl. The program must also, and this is the most ridiculous, stupidest thing the NCAA ever does, the program must also vacate 11 wins. Who cares? Nobody ever looks at a vacated win and goes, oh, my God, now we lost the game. Never happens. I promise you, nobody ever said that in the history of vacated wins.
I will say this. How many violations did you say they have?
Over 200.
Over 200. There was one school that I do remember that actually might have had more violations than that one.
Who's that?
Blue Mountain State. I don't know if you ever saw the TV show.
Yeah.
At the end of season 2, I believe they had I don't know how many, but that's just all I think about is that stat.
I remember that.
But no, I mean, no, that is crazy. 200 violations. I mean, we're talking Blue Mountain State type numbers here. And here's the other thing too: the NCAA knew that they weren't going to bowl ban this team. Tennessee is a brand. They are a huge brand within the SEC. Doesn't matter when they're bad, and they're even better when they're good. The money from the Volunteers and everything else that's going to go along with it, the NCAA is not going to remove them from postseason play because the money for the Volunteers and everything that's going on is just right now.
This is going to hurt the program. Tennessee is going to lose 28 scholarships over 5 years, with at least 2 lost each season. The program's reduced scholarships by over 16 over the first 2 seasons due to self-imposed sanctions, meaning current head coach Josh Heupel and his staff must only sit 12 total scholarships short over the next 3 seasons. Pruitt's 6-year show cause is the most significant in a group of 5 additional handed out. Again, if Pruitt is hired during the 6-year show cause window, he will be suspended for the entire first season, just one of the first year of the new job. Pruitt was briefly Nick Saban wanted to hire him, I believe, as the defensive coordinator, but passed him over. And I think this is why
Clearly.
Nick passed him over. And Tennessee also loses 36 official visits over the course of probation, and at least 4 per season. The Vols will have to select 10 regular season games, which they cannot host official visits, including 4 SEC games. Unofficial visits will be reduced for 40 weeks over the next 5 years. Could have been a lot worse.
Could have been a lot worse.
But it will hurt the program.
It will, but I think at the same time, with what Heupel's been able to do, and I think with what Tennessee, if they continue to have a good season, I think that they definitely are going to feel the pinch. But it's going to be a pinch, I think, for what Heupel's
That's
been
about
able to
what it
accomplish.
is.
You know, it's going to feel they're probably going to lose some guys, but at the same time, I think Tennessee. Maybe we're not talking about Tennessee over the course of the next couple of years as a college football. Well, we might because it's going to be expanded to 12 here soon. But either way, maybe we're not talking about a national championship kind of Tennessee volunteer team, but we're talking about still a consistent team. I don't see them dropping off. Maybe they drop one more game. Maybe they're 9-4, 8-4 versus 9-3 or 10-2 in that regard.
Yeah, good point. All right, so last week we did the SEC West. SEC Media Days are coming up this week. Last week, Big 12. Next week we'll do the Big 12 and really take a prolonged look at UCF next week. I got to find my UCF helmet like this and get it up on the table. But a SEC West: Alabama, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Mississippi State, Texas A&M, Auburn, and LSU. But I think, Nach, and I'll let you go first, but I think this year, Nach, if you're talking SEC West, it comes down to Bama and LSU. But how do you see this thing shaking out in 2023?
I don't know if you've been reading, my friend. Phil Steele loves himself some Aggies.
Yeah, well,
Texas A&M's got 20 starters back. Only big question is who's playing quarterback.
Don't they always choke? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think, is it Connor Wigman or is it Max Johnson playing for Jimbo Fisher? But this is a big year for Jimbo. I mean, he really hasn't returned on investment for the 10-year contract that he received. Texas A&M really hasn't. I mean, they've been good, but we're not talking about putting Texas A&M in the college football playoff yet. But I will say this. I think if you're looking at – I think Bama – I don't know what to expect from their quarterback position. But
they don't have one yet. I mean, they got 3 battling, but go ahead.
Right, but they've had years where it's not like they've had stellar quarterback play. We're not talking about winning Heisman trophies. We've seen AJ McCarron. I'm sorry. We've seen Greg McElroy. We've seen those guys win national championships for Bama, even though they're not high flying passers. But I think LSU and Texas A&M are obviously the contenders in this division. I think Brian Kelly really solidified because he was pretty much the punching bag of the SEC going in.
Yeah.
And he's shown that, once again, he's a great coach and why he had success at Notre Dame. They got the returning quarterback in Jaden Daniels. Can they continue to just get over the hump? Do they beat Florida State? I think if they beat Florida State and then they take care of the business with Bama and they get a win there, then I think LSU is the team that we're talking about in the SEC West. But outside of that, it's going to be really tough. Hugh Freeze at Auburn looks really interesting now that he's back in the SEC. Can he turn around? Because we've seen Auburn make one-year turnarounds before, so that'll be interesting. The one team that I do feel for, and this is one of the biggest heartbreaks towards the end of the college football season last year, was Mike Leach passing away from Mississippi State, and the fact that we won't have him as a character in college football. That's college football's lesson by him gone. And I think at the same time, I think this is going to be a really challenging year for Mississippi State because, again, it's just so hard to replace Mike Leach, one as a game planner and offensive schemer, but at the same time, too, just what he brought for them. So I think it's going to be Texas A&M and LSU to challenge Bama. But I will say this, and I'm curious to see if you agree. I think the SEC West is kind of starting to become what the SEC East used to be.
Agree. I think when you look at the SEC West this year, I do think that ultimately, who do you have winning it?
I'm going to go with Bama because it's just, again, I think that Alabama will have enough to be able to take care of business. I think LSU, again, I just can't do it. It's Bama. I think Nick Saban gets there.
I think when you look at every team, like Alabama, we know, first of all, Alabama's got superior skill position players. They got a plethora of talented wide receivers, great running backs. I mean, they got it all. But quarterback, and that's huge. And they get 3 guys vying for the position. coming into camp. And Saban has said, he doesn't have a clear-cut starter yet. But every team has an issue. For me personally, I believe it'll be Ty Simpson that wins the job. And I say Ty because I think Ty's father is a head football coach.
Yeah, he's at UT Martin, which is in the FCS.
Right. So I think
really great guy.
Yeah, I think Ty wins this job coming out of camp. But I don't think there's a lot of separation between LSU and Alabama. I think the benefit for Alabama this year is their schedule, because all of the good teams in the SEC got to travel to Tuscaloosa this year, and that includes the Bayou Bengals, by the way. But look, you look at Alabama last year, and you look at that game. That was a great game last year. Absolutely phenomenal football game between these two last year. Well, I think it went to overtime, didn't it? And LSU won in overtime last year? Yeah. This was a great defense, an LSU defense last year that limited offenses to under 23 points a game. That's pretty big in college football. They're going to be better up front this year. They get Mason Smith back from a knee injury that cost him a lot of last year. Harold Perkins, another great LSU linebacker, Harold Perkins comes in. He's poised to create a lot of havoc in the middle. We'll see. Secondary, touch and go, but who's going to beat it?
I mean, right now, the only offense that you can really trust would be LSU with their skill positions, because they can match. But again, like I said, I think Ole Miss isn't quite there yet. I think Arkansas, they're going to try, but I don't think they have it enough there yet either. So I think it's really down to Texas A&M and LSU to really challenge Alabama. And again, you're talking about an entire division where we still haven't seen them close the gap on the offensive and defensive lines.
You get, in LSU, you get Jaden Daniels in his second year in Brian Kelly's system. They got two fantastic, four great hands in Malik Neighbors. And they got a great tight end in Mason Taylor, who's phenomenal. Again, we talked about Alabama. To me, it's those two. We talked about the Aggies, right? So we were talking about the Aggies. Last year, this was a team that started out and everybody said, oh, my God, they were a preseason top 10 last year.
They were.
The Aggies were. Jimbo Fisher, they didn't get it done.
Injuries plagued that team last year because, they went through 3-4 quarterbacks.
Yep.
One transfer to Georgia Tech, and now they're down to the two guys that they're trying to battle with.
The best move of Jimbo Fisher's career, if he wants to continue to make this money, is the fact that he brought in Bobby Petrino as his offensive coordinator. And what I love. Connor Wegman is he's got a great trio of wide receivers, Aeneas Smith, Evan Stewart, and Moose Muhammad III. So we'll see if they can get it done. They got 5-star freshman Reuben Owens, who will help fill the void left by Devin. I always screw this guy's last name up, but he was the running back. They got a very young defense, though, a very young defense. They struggled last year to stop the run. They were 14th in the whole damn conference. But they still limited points to teams to 21 points a game. I don't think talent's the issue. That youth and inexperience should start to develop a little bit better. Ole Miss, 7-0 last year. Lane Kiffin was the golden boy. He was the next prodigy, right? He learned his lesson. He got smacked on the hands when he quit USC and went back to working with Nick Saban and learned how to become a head football coach. And last year he's 7-0, but the Ole Miss fizzled down the stretch. To me, this year, this all revolves around Jackson Dart. And I'm going to give Lane Kiffin credit because he brought in guys to battle Jackson Dart during Spencer Sanders and Walker Howard were brought in. Dart held them off. So we'll see. You get Quinshawn Judkins, who is one of the best running backs in the country. Most certainly the SEC back there. And then you get the additions of Trey Harris and Zachary Franklin in a very thin but good receiving core. Defensively, we'll see. I think that's what's going to cost Ole Miss this year. I'm interested to see how my guy Raheem Sanders does at Arkansas. Listen, I'm a big fan of KJ Jefferson, the quarterback. He's back this year. Offense is not going to be the problem for Arkansas. It's defense. But I do love Sam Pittman went out and brings in former UCF defensive coordinator Travis Williams to run the defense. I like what Travis Williams did with that UCF defense. They allowed almost 31 points a game this year. Arkansas is going to be able to score with anybody, but they're also going to need to stop people. So you'll see a lot of high-scoring games. Now, Arkansas could be potentially one of those teams that win 5 games, or they can win 9. And it's all going to depend on whether or not they can outscore the other team. You talked about Mississippi State, Auburn. I have dead last in the conference, but I've got LSU winning
the West.
The West this year. I think they win the West this year. Listen, Alabama has got to settle that quarterback position. We'll see if they settle it in time.
And they got a new offensive coordinator as well. Tommy Rees now the offensive coordinator for Bama coming from.
But I like Brian Kelly and LSU. I like LSU and Georgia in the SEC championship. And I said last week I wouldn't pick Georgia for a 3rd straight year. So I'll take LSU to win the SEC this year. I will tell you this. That first game against Florida State is huge, baby. It's huge. Now, it ain't huge for the SEC or the ACC. But for those national rankings, man.
Well, it's a big game for both teams because we're talking about LSU and Florida State. We've talked about Florida State in the ACC already. We're talking about Florida State and how much that game pivots their season because they get Clemson a couple weeks later. If they get a big win over LSU, that's huge. If they lose, and if it's a close loss, then it is what it is.
Like last year.
If it's a field goal. But if we're talking it's a touchdown, 10 points, either way, we're talking about a team that's going to be really big in the question marks following that after.
Nach, the good news is we'll all be there because that game's at Camping World Stadium.
That's fantastic. I love that.
We're excited about that. All right, Nach, it's that time of the week. Our angel and our idiot of the week. I'm going to let you go first because mine's going to create a little controversy.
Yeah, I know. Your idiot's pretty much the same as mine. I will say this. My angel of the week, though, and I know this, I'm basing this off purely just watching one episode of Quarterbacks, but I got to say, Julie Cousins, absolutely loved her, and you just kind of see that down to earth. Like, honestly, I know everyone loves making fun of the Cousins family and making fun of Kirk.
Kirk likes making fun of himself.
Absolutely. But they just seem down to earth. Like, I mean, I looked at their home. They got a fire pit out back. I mean.
Buddy, wait till episode 8. You will be sitting in that chair going, remember what I said about the Cousins and how great they are? They are still great, a very Christian family, but you can only take so much of them.
Well, you can only take so much of Brittany Mahomes, too. I know.
Oh, Brittany Mahomes. I can't even stand to listen to her talk.
Listen, I'll be honest. I think she gets a little too much flack. She has stepped it back.
You're right.
She has stepped it back. Now, Jackson Mahomes, that's a completely different story.
It's interesting. I tell you this. He does not appear in any of these episodes.
You think that was an editing decision? Or
no,
do you think
I
was
just
by
think
design?
I think Patrick's got smart people around him. And
That's true.
And Brittany Mahomes is enough. Okay?
Yeah.
But the thing that you're going to find out as you continue to watch this series, it's not really his wife that's got the mouth issue. Keep that in mind.
Okay.
All right? And you'll know what I mean. But no, it's a great show. And I love the Cousins. And listen, Kurt's a great guy. And I loved how he speaks with his heart. And he's just one of the smartest guys to ever played in the National Football League. Why? Because he accepted 3 straight years of franchise tag deals, which paid him over $200 million. Did you see his house?
It's a nice house.
Wait till you see the one that Mahomes has built.
Oh, no. I saw the one Mahomes built. And I saw the images of the new house they just built.
And trust me, I was told this week that Jawan Taylor built a home right down the street from Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, I hope he did. I hope he got a nice home.
Yeah. So, all right.
Your idiot's my idiot.
Your idiot. Okay. So my angel and idiot of the week could be both, and it depends on who you are and how you see this situation.
Yeah.
Me, I think she's an idiot. Danielle Hemsley, who won something called, now what was this called? First of all, she
was a boxer, right?
she's a model.
It was more like celebrity.
Oh, I thought she was like a legit boxer.
It's called Kingpin Boxing is what it's called, okay? But she's a very popular, what's that thing called? Where online that a lot of you young people deal with and go to. Young fans. OnlyFans. Apparently she's an OnlyFans model.
Okay.
And a good boxer and likes to keep herself in shape. And all I'm going to say is as to why Daniela Hemsley is our angel and idiot of the week, well, just Google it. That's all you need to do.
Yeah.
Just
You can
Google
find
it,
on Twitter.
and then you make your decision as to which way you see her.
I'll say this: she does make Mia Hamm's celebration at the World Cup in 2000 look a lot more PG.
Yeah, she puts Mia Hamm to shame. There's no doubt about that in terms of the celebration, all right? That's all I mean is just the celebration. But you Google her, and you decide for yourself whether you see her act as your angel of the week or your idiot of the week. In the hopes that Brevard Sports Network continues, she'll be my idiot of the week.
She's on my list as idiot.
There you go. So it's Caleb, idiot? Yes, Caleb, right? Yep. Yeah. All right, there you go. It says the 26-year-old male. Okay. Final thoughts, Nach. Good show tonight, buddy.
No, a great show. Like I said, I think the biggest thing is man, we started talking some high school football, and I think that's really exciting. I know we've talked about two powerhouse teams, and I'll say this now, and I know I'll say this throughout the course as we get ready for the high school football season. I think Brevard County football is going to be great this year, and like I said, I know the Cocos are going to do what the Cocos do. Rockledges and Heritages are going to do what they're going to do, but I really think for me the most interesting aspect for Brevard football this year is going to be just all those other teams and what they're doing, who's going to come to the top, because I think between Melbourne, I'm very curious to see what they do this year. O'Galley as well. I think O'Galley's going to be one of the top teams. Merritt Island, what they do. They've got some talented football players. I think the mix that, when we talk about the teams after Cocoa, Rockledge, Heritage, I think what we see from those teams is going to be very interesting, and where I really kind of am looking forward to taking a deep dive over the course of the next couple of weeks.
I'll just tease it with this. I started the Rockledge Raiders preview today. Started it. I'll finish it this week. But as I was looking at their schedule, I often laud Cocoa as having the toughest schedule in the state. But you look at Rockledge, and I'm going to put together this winning percentage, and it wouldn't shock me if it was higher than the one Cocoa had. Rockledge will start the season against Seminole. They will then travel to face the defending 6A Texas State champ, 15-0, Duncanville. I'm trying to remember. Panthers, I think they're called, the Duncanville Panthers, in Duncanville, Texas. They come home to play an improved Vieira team. They've got Bayside. And then they play Osceola, which beat them last year and is no joke. And Trinity Christian, who was 11-1 last year. So,
and they're a team that's usually always in the mix for state titles.
Yep. So, remember, don't forget, we saw Trinity Christian down here in 2016 playing on ESPN against Bruce Judson.
In the Cocoa Tigers, that's right.
On a Sunday,
right.
Yep. So my final thoughts are thank all of you again, and I want to thank, again, all of you, because without you, we don't win that award. I want to thank our sponsor again, Archaic Design, of course, Caleb, who works the cameras and does all the great stuff that he does behind the scenes. And he had a soccer game tonight, and so that's why he couldn't join us. And I want to thank Nach. And Nach, is it okay to finally put up a post that you're joining Brevard Sports Network?
Yeah, I'll have something tomorrow officially posting and all that stuff. So, yeah.
All right, that'll be great because, I don't think it's a secret anymore.
No, I know. Well, you got to get it all right. You got to get the videos, the graphics, the design teams. There's a lot of process. It's not just simply saying anymore.
I got you. But, no doubt. But thank you, Nach. And, again, we miss our guy who's out in Chicago, as Kelly Bundy used to say, Jackson Rob, he'll be back soon, out visiting his dad for the month of July. So for Caleb Brown, for Anthony Nachreiner, I am Alan Slaughterzinski, and you have been watching Mouthin Off Sports Talk. Have a great night, everybody. Well, you know the drill. What's left of it, make it a sports night. And welcome back to Brevard, Coach Piccolo.